Hi, this is Patty Shannon. I am a senior legal assistant at the Texas Ethics Commission, and this presentation will cover some of the rules and statutes that govern lobbying in Texas. If you have any questions while we are going through this presentation, you are welcome and encouraged to reach out to us. You can call us at 512-463-5800. If you have any questions about how to use our electronic filing application or how to reset your password, things like that, ask for technical support. If you have questions about whether you are a lobbyist or how to fill out a lobby registration or lobby activity report, ask for the legal department. All right, before we get started, let's talk about the lobbying page we have set up on our website. Keep in mind that our website is being redesigned right now, and this page will be found elsewhere soon. But for now, from our home page at ethics.state.tx.us, click on Resources at the top left, then Lobbying. This page has a number of different resources for lobbyists that you should check out. Resource number 3 on this page, Lobbying in Texas, A Guide to the Texas Law, is the first place you should start after this video. This guide has a wealth of information to help you navigate lobbying in Texas, and it will include things we do not have time to cover in this presentation. This page also has links to Chapter 305 of the Government Code and Chapter 34 of the Texas Ethics Commission Rules, which are the main statutes and rules that govern lobbyists in Texas. So what are we going to cover today? Are you a lobbyist? What is not lobbying? What are your prohibited activities? And then we will go over Form REG, which is the registration form, and Form LA, which is the lobby activity report form. Texas Government Code Section 305.001 states that people must be given the fullest opportunity to freely express their opinions on legislation, executive actions, and current issues to their legislators, committees, state agencies, and members of the executive branch. That being said, 305.001 goes on to say that you must disclose the identity, expenditures, and activities of certain persons who communicate directly with government officials, so that we preserve and maintain the integrity of the legislative and administrative processes. I know this is tiny, but bear with me. This chart can be found on our website. It gives some general information about the number of lobbyists in Texas by year, how much in total was spent by all lobbyists in each category, and the total amount spent by all lobbyists per year. You can see that the number of lobbyists per year ranges from a low of 1,248 in 2002 to a high of 1,932 in 2017. So let's take apart the definition of a lobbyist. You do not meet the definition of a lobbyist unless you meet all 3 of these criteria. Is it part of your regular employment? Meaning, are you paid to do this, or are you doing it as a volunteer? Are you communicating directly with a member of the legislative or executive branch? For instance, posting support or opposition to proposed legislation on your personal Facebook page would not count. And are you doing that communication in order to influence legislation or administrative action? So if you are doing this as a volunteer on your own dime, and not representing anyone while you are doing it, then you are not a lobbyist. The general public can talk to their legislators and state agencies without registering as a lobbyist. But if it's your job to talk to or write to legislators with the purpose of influencing how they vote on a particular bill, then you may have crossed the line. Let's keep exploring this. Direct communication is not done just in person. You contact a legislator or their staff directly via a phone call, letter, text, or email. That also counts. Communication with any staff at a legislative office or in the executive branch of government also counts, not just the actual legislator or the head of a state agency. And communication with candidates for those offices counts too. But remember, it's not just that you directly communicate with that person. You have to do it with the purpose of influencing the outcome of a bill or administrative action, and you have to be paid to do it. Let's talk about prohibited lobbying for just a moment. If you were previously a candidate or an office holder and you used any of your leftover contributions to make contributions or direct expenditures to benefit another candidate, office holder, or political action committee, you cannot engage in any activity that would require lobby registration until at least 2 years have passed from the date you made that contribution or direct expenditure. See the opinions on this page for more information. The Texas lobby law applies only to communications to state officers and employees. It does not apply to a communication made to an officer, employee, or anyone else who represents a political subdivision of state government, such as a county, city, school district, etc. So if you communicate with a state officer or employee in the state legislative or executive branch on behalf of a local political subdivision, that would be lobbying. But if you communicate directly with a local political subdivision to influence their activity, that is what would not be considered lobbying for purposes of Chapter 305 of the Government Code, which is what the Ethics Commission can interpret and enforce. None of the actions listed on this slide are considered communicating directly with the legislative or executive branch, so they do not meet the definition of lobbying. Posting on publicly available websites, communicating with your own donors, publishing something on your own website, and newspapers or other bona fide news mediums are not lobbying. So let's say you meet the definition of a lobbyist. You still may not need to register as a lobbyist unless you cross one of several thresholds: compensation, time, and expenditures. You do not need to meet all of these thresholds to register. Just one or possibly two is enough to require it. The compensation or reimbursement threshold means, are you paid or reimbursed more than $1,930 per calendar quarter by someone else to do this work? The monetary thresholds in this presentation are adjusted annually. The numbers in this presentation apply to 2025 lobbyists. See Ethics Commission Rule 18.31 for the latest numbers. The time threshold we will talk about next does not change. Did you spend more than 40 hours, i.e. a full work week, per calendar quarter doing this work? If you cross the compensation threshold but do not spend at least 40 hours per calendar quarter doing it, you do not have to register. Remember that time spent includes preparation time. On expenditures, do you spend more than $970 per calendar quarter doing lobbying activities? If the only client or clients you have are political parties, the threshold is different. You only have to register as a lobbyist if both your compensation and expenditures total more than $11,120 in a calendar year. So what is a lobby expenditure? Expenditures are broken down into categories for reporting purposes. These categories are listed on this and the following slide. They include transportation and lodging, food and beverages, entertainment, gifts, and mass media communications. Opinion number 562 for more information on mass media communications. Lobby expenditures also include awards and mementos and the attendance of a state officer or employee at a political fundraiser or charity event. This slide also includes the definition of an expenditure for purposes of the lobby laws. So what is not a lobby expenditure? The following expenditures would not be reported: taxes and tips, or the lobbyist's own expenditures. So expenditures for your transportation, lodging, and meals are not reported and do not count towards your expenditure threshold. It also includes certain expenditures that are reimbursed by a state officer. If your expenditure is less than $200 and is reimbursed by a state officer or employee before you would be required to report it, it does not count as a lobby expenditure. Gifts to a state agency are also not considered lobby expenditures. What are some other prohibited activities for lobbyists? Contingent fees. It is illegal for a person to retain or employ another to influence legislation or administrative action if compensation is totally or partially contingent on the passage or defeat of any legislation, the governor's approval or veto of that legislation, or the outcome of an administrative action. It is also prohibited for a lobbyist to go on the floor of the House or the Senate during session unless they are invited. It is also a crime to knowingly or willfully make a false statement or misrepresentation of fact to a state officer or employee in order to influence legislation or administrative action. So when do you need to file your lobby registration? Registrations are done on an annual basis. They automatically expire on December 31st of each year, so you need to re-register annually. Registration for the next year opens up on December 1st of the previous year. If you do not register at the beginning of the year, but later engage in lobby activities, you must register within 5 days after the date on which you make the first direct communication. So if you've determined that you need to register as a lobbyist, the first thing you need to do is fill out both of the documents in the first bullet on this slide: the filer ID request/name change and lobby security form. These are both filled out on paper and then sent in to the email located on the back of each form. You cannot file these through the lobby electronic filing application. After the TEC receives both of these documents, we will send an email to you within 1 to 2 business days with your filer ID number, which, by the way, you should keep handy because this is how we will find your information going forward, and your temporary login and password. This will allow you to go online to file your registration and lobby activity reports. And please note, you are not registered after filing these 2 documents. These 2 documents just get you into our lobby electronic filing application where you can file your registration. Your registration fee is either $750 or $150. It is only $150 if your only client is a nonprofit. But if you have even one client that is not a nonprofit, you have to pay the higher $750 fee. This fee can be paid online when you register. Registration by entities. An entity can register as a lobbyist and has to under certain circumstances. A corporation or other type of entity may be required to register as a lobbyist if they exceed either the compensation or expenditure threshold. An entity that is required to register may nonetheless avoid registration if all activity otherwise reportable by that entity is reported by one or more registrants. An individual may report on behalf of an entity if that entity requests the individual to do so in order to avoid multiple registrations. For instance, let's say ABC Company has several employees that do lobbying activity for them. Employee A, on her own, meets at least one of the filing thresholds and must register as an individual. Employees B and C also lobby for ABC Company, but neither meets any of the filing thresholds on their own. So they do not need to register as an individual, but together they go over some or all of the thresholds, which means ABC Company needs to register. But ABC Company can avoid registering if employee A agrees to report all activity by herself and B and C and anyone else with ABC Company. This allows ABC Company to avoid paying multiple annual registration fees, and they can also avoid filing multiple lobby activity reports. Employee A would indicate this on their lobby activity report. Conversely, if an entity decides to register and one of their employees crosses any of the filing thresholds on their own, that individual still has to register. The entity cannot report activity by that individual. The fact that an entity has registered does not relieve any individual associated with that entity of the obligation to register if they cross a registration threshold. For example, if a law firm registers and an individual lawyer employed by that firm as a lobbyist for the firm's clients must also register if he or she meets either the compensation or expenditure thresholds. So when are lobby activity reports due? For regular filers, each report covers activity for the preceding month and is due by the 10th of the following month, unless that lands on a weekend or holiday, in which case it is due the next business day. So you would report lobbying activity for all of May by June 10th of that year. The late filing penalty for lobby activity reports is $500, but it can be increased to as much as $10,000. You can appeal a late filing penalty by filing a statement of defense. Modified filers will be covered more fully on the next slide. You used to file your lobby activity reports annually instead of monthly if you don't intend to make lobby expenditures exceeding $2,220 for that entire year. Remember, that number is adjusted annually, and that $2,220 is for 2025. If you registered as an annual filer and you later exceed that expenditure threshold, you must begin to file monthly. Follow the bullets on this slide. Filing an amended registration is not technically necessary in this situation because you can just check the box on your first activity report that says exceeded modified reporting threshold. However, filing an amended registration does make it clearer. So let's start going over the two main forms for lobbyists. Form REG is for registering. The cover sheet is fairly self-explanatory, but remember, Form REG and Form LA for the lobby activity report must be filed electronically after you first send in both the filer ID-REQ and form security forms. Section 12 on the cover sheet for Form REG is for FARA, F-A-R-A registration. You must indicate whether you have also filed an active registration under the Foreign Agents Registration Act of 1938. Section 14 for notarization or an unsworn declaration is done automatically for electronic filers. Schedule A of Form REG must be completed separately for each person or entity that reimburses, retains, or employs you to influence legislation or administrative action, and on whose behalf you have engaged in lobbying activities. This will almost always include your employer. The categories for the level of compensation you receive from each employer or client are adjusted annually for inflation. The electronic filing application should have the latest numbers, but you can go to Texas Ethics Commission Rule 18.31 to see the current numbers. The type of compensation will be one of three categories, as shown on this slide: paid, earned, or prospective. When in doubt, choose prospective. You fill out certain information on Schedule A depending on the type of client you are reporting for. The electronic filing application will guide you depending on how you answer the first couple of questions, and this slide explains that briefly. Schedule B of Form REG is used for each person you employ or retain for the purpose of assisting you in your lobby activity. Do not fill it out for anyone who provides only clerical or secretarial help. Now let's move on to the lobby activity reports, Form LA. Most of the cover sheet is also self-explanatory and will be filled out automatically by the electronic filing application. Just follow the prompts. Section 7 covers expenditure totals by type, and it summarizes the amounts by type of activity, such as transportation and lodging or food and beverage. Section 8 covers expenditure totals by the persons benefited, such as senators or representatives or their employees. The individual expenditures that make up these totals may also need to be itemized on the accompanying schedules, depending on the amounts of each expenditure. We will cover this more fully in the coming slide. Next, we will spend some time going through the various schedules on the lobby activity report. For schedules B, C, and D, you must report any activity in that category that totals more than 60% of the legislative per diem for legislators. That amount is $132.60. You report any expenditures over $132.60 that were spent on one official on a certain day, not in total for that activity. The general rule of thumb is that you cannot provide transportation and lodging, but there are exceptions, such as fact-finding trips or incidental transportation. There is no daily or annual limit for the amount of transportation you may give. We will explain the presence requirement in more detail later. Schedule C is for food and beverages. Again, you must report any food and beverage expenditures over $132.60. Contrast that with Schedule E, which we will cover in a moment, where you report gifts, which sometimes includes food and beverages when the value is more than $110 and has other requirements. Schedule E will be explained more fully in a moment. For now, just realize that certain food and beverage expenditures might be considered a gift and will need to be reported on that schedule. And notice that Schedule C is for any food and beverage expenditure that is over $132.60 for one official on a certain day. Schedule E's threshold is $110 and has other specific requirements we will cover in a moment. There is no daily or annual limit for Schedule C, and the lobbyist must be present. Schedule D covers entertainment. You must report any entertainment expenditures over $132.60. There is no daily limit. However, the expenditures for entertainment are limited to a total of $500 annually per officer, employee, etc. These also have the presence requirement. A lobby registrant may also provide necessary expenditures for entertainment provided in connection with a conference, etc., in which the state officer or employee provides services that are more than merely perfunctory, and the registrant is present. Schedule E is for gifts. You must report any gift expenditure over $110. Unlike the previous $132.60 threshold we talked about earlier, the threshold for gifts, awards, and mementos is adjusted annually for inflation. For 2025, that number is $110. You report a food and beverage gift on Schedule E if the value is over $110. It is intended as a gift for a state officer or employee, and it is delivered by U.S. mail or common contract carrier outside the Capitol complex. There is no value limit, but gifts are limited to a total of $500 annually per officer or employee, etc. Schedule F is for awards and mementos. It has the same threshold as Schedule E, $110, which is adjusted annually for inflation. You may provide an award or memento to a state officer or employee if it is not valued at more than $500, because you cannot spend more than $500 on a single award or memento. But there is no aggregate annual limit as there is on gifts. Schedule G is for political fundraisers and charity events. You must report any expenditure in this category, no matter how much. You report any expenditures you made for each officer or employee of the executive or legislative branch for them to attend a political fundraiser or charity event. The lobbyist must also be present for this, which we're going to explain on the next slide. So here's the presence requirement. It applies to expenditures for transportation and lodging, food and beverages, entertainment, or attendance at a charity or fundraising event. The lobbyist must be present for any of these expenditures. It can be satisfied by either the lobbyist or a person whose position, authority, or conduct on behalf of the entity could support an award of exemplary damages against that entity. The presence requirement cannot be satisfied by being present on a Zoom or Teams meeting. Lobby registrations automatically terminate on December 31st of every year. You can also terminate it yourself at any time by filing a final lobby activity report. When you check the box that says final in the electronic filing application, it will automatically generate Form TN, which is the termination notice, which is also needed. You can search for numerous things related to lobbyists on our website. Again, remember that our website is being redesigned and where to find this information may be different soon. But for now, go to our homepage, click on the search button in the dark gray bar above the picture, then choose Lobby Registration/Activity Reports. This will bring up the page you see on this slide. Here you can search through lobby registrations, lobby activity reports, expenditures, etc. So thanks for watching. Remember, if you have any questions, call us at 512-463-5800 and have a great day.